tension was high. In October, an American diplomat was stopped by East German guards as he was crossing to visit the theater in East Berlin. The Americans decided to make an issue of it and assert their right to free movement in Berlin. Lucius Clay was back on the scene.
Clay's calculation was that the Soviets were responsible for East Berlin, not the East Germans, and he was determined that the Soviets would recognize their responsibility there.
To test East German reaction, Clay ordered armed American soldiers to escort vehicles back and forth across the border at Checkpoint Charlie.
He once told me, he said, I learned early in the game of dealing with the Russians, if the Russians understand one thing, and that's force, that's strength. You must never negotiate or deal with the Russians without having a position of strength.
To underline his point, Clay moved tanks up to the checkpoint. The Russians brought up their tanks and guns. The two sides faced each other barrel to barrel.
The telephone rang in the command post. He said, let me speak to General Clay. I said, he's not here. Who is this? He said, this is the military police officer at Checkpoint Charlie. He said, holy Christ, he said, the Russians have rolled in here in force. He said, they've got tanks. He said, the balloon's getting ready to go up. He said, the defecation is about to hit the fan.
The situation was dangerous. The tanks stood facing each other. Our tank crews were told to exercise restraint, to give no grounds for provocation.
The dead seriousness of it became more intense with each hour. The Western forces went on alert, Strategic Air Command went on alert, NATO went on alert, troops were being cranked up around the world, and one never knew if the intensity of the situation in Berlin escalated, where would be the next sore point.
Khrushchev ordered the commander of Soviet troops in Germany that if the West used force, they should respond with force.
Я как раз сидел в генеральном штабе, когда проходил съезд.
I had a phone by one ear receiving information from Soviet military headquarters in Germany.
Информацию из группы войск Германии.
The other phone was connected to the Kremlin. As soon as I got the information, I reported to the Kremlin what was happening at Friedrichstrasse.
President Kennedy had sent a message to Khrushchev through a new private channel that had been established only a month earlier for a back channel between the White House and Khrushchev, and that President Kennedy had asked Khrushchev to take the first move.
The Americans sent a message. It said, in order for us to move our tanks without losing face, you should move your tanks back to a certain distance. Our tanks stood 200 meters from the Americans.
The lead Soviet tank cranked up his engine and backed up some 5 or 10 meters, and we received instructions to have the American tanks to withdraw exactly the same distance.
It wasn't a good enough reason to start a war. Khrushchev himself said, we're not unleashing a third world war because of Berlin. The Americans realized that too.
The soldiers pulled back, but the wall remained. The East Germans built it higher and backed it with fences, tripwires, and tank traps. During the first year, 50 Germans died trying to cross to the west.